Delighted it's a small group tonight. So, Mr. Smolka and Jelnix, thank you for coming. They're my guests. So I'm glad they're here. Before I get started, I want to talk about pheasants. So I'm glad, I don't know, does anyone belong to Pheasants Forever? You're going to be an expert on that, and I'm not. On current pheasants situations, I mean, so I'm going to stop right around 1980. So the last 40 years, that's something I don't know much about at all. So the work that they do and what the true statuses of pheasants are right now. Maybe you can fill us in when we get down there how you see it. But I don't know much about it. I was never a successful pheasant hunter in my life. I never was. I shot one rooster in my life. In part because this guy was a crack shot. It's my dad. He was a marksman, and during the Cold War he was in Alaska, and he was something else to hunt with because he would shoot. I mean, I saw him drop a deer on the run, a buck on the run. It must have been 60 or 70 yards. He just dropped it. I was hunting with him once. See him shoot it, pick a rifle up and an animal on the move and drop it. He was just an incredible shot. So when we went pheasant hunting, I mean, he was such a good shot. He would let his kids shoot. I couldn't hit anything. So he would jump in once in a while, but he was such a good hunter. But he's growing up. This picture is taken about 1955, 56, which is the peak of pheasant really in Gratiot County. That's when it was the best. And he had a collection of tails. Pheasant tails, the tail feathers, which my grandmother put in his room in a vase, and so I grew up with these pheasant feathers. And when he passed, I made sure that one of the grandsons got it, and I told him the story about it. I said, "Those are pheasants that your grandfather shot, probably in the 1950s." But my earliest memory is this on the right: is that he was in my grandparents' basement. I must have been 4 or 5. And he's scalding this pheasant to pull those feathers off. And I just remember all this steam coming up. And I remember saying, "You're not coming down here. This is, this burn, you'll burn, so you're not coming down here." But I can still remember that pheasant hanging, out of that container. He's picking those feathers off of there. Yeah. It was in the bottom of Grandma's. It was in Grandma's house, not at our house. So that's where. But I remember that's probably my earliest memory about pheasants. But when there are some family movies where he shot pictures of pheasants on the farm, and I remember getting so excited about, look at the pheasants, look at the pheasants. And he grew up at a time, he got to hunt at a time when it was at its best in Gratiot County. I hunted at a time when it was in its decline. I mean, it was really in decline. Oh, please don't do this. Please don't do this to me. Okay. So, I guess I was going to read this little excerpt from the Gratiot County Herald. This is 1920. So pheasants have been here. Pheasants have been here for over 20 years, but they're really struggling. And somebody wrote this article to the Herald and said, "Who killed the last deer in Gratiot?" This is dear editor of Herald. This is from Elder Rushby, whoever this is, from Lafayette. He said, "I wish to ask the question: who last killed a deer running at large in Gratiot County, or a wolf?" Or a turkey, a bear, a passenger, or a wild pigeon. We believe the late Frank Gulick of Lafayette shot the last bear in Gratiot, or rather last shot at the last bear in Gratiot. What reason or reasons do scientists give for the sudden disappearance of the beautiful wild pigeon and these other animals? So by the turn of the 20th century, I mean, our wildlife has been decimated. So it's big news. If somebody sees a bobcat or a red fox, this is big news. It usually gets in the newspaper and somebody has seen this or shot one or found one. We just don't have that much wildlife. The one thing that people are concerned about at this time are the quail and the quail population. That's one remaining species that hunters are after in the county. So that's kind of the backdrop in the early 20th century when pheasants started to arrive here. They are strangers. People are concerned that pheasants will run off the quail, that they'll damage the habitat. There's a lot of skepticism about pheasants. George Washington had pheasants. Ben Franklin's nephew or son had pheasants. They were English pheasants, but in both cases the pheasants were basically extinguished on their farms. This is about the time about the American Revolution. But this guy, Judge Owen Denny, was a consul, like an ambassador to Japan in the 1880s, and he and his wife had this fascination with pheasants. And he was interested in bringing pheasants over to Portland, Oregon. And in 1881, he brought 12 male pheasants and 3 females and let them go on his farm. And he told the people that they were to leave the pheasants alone, no hunting. And there was a little bit of a growth to the flock. A year later, he brought over 30 birds, and they were let go in the Willamette Valley. Again, the community was told no hunting, let them go. And the population quickly rose to 1,000 birds until men went in and again extinguished the whole flock. Hunters went in and just shot them, mercilessly. And that's a common issue, I think, with pheasants, is that people can't leave the pheasants alone to let them populate, or there's overhunting. And there are traces of this over the last 100 years here in Gratiot County, different instances where that has happened. But we think the first pheasants probably came to Gratiot County about 1898. There's an article that says Dr. Scott and George Reed of Ithaca brought in or will receive a selection of eggs in town. It's not for sure what the Scots did with the eggs or how successful it was, but this is the first time it's mentioned. In 1905, pheasants are mentioned as being protected in Gratiot County. They were off limits, and they would be for another 23 years. No hunting of pheasants. They were to be left alone with the chance to propagate. And also, it was under the rule that said pheasants are game owned by the state of Michigan. They are the state property, and they are to be left alone. But these 4 species, over the first 30 years, are brought into the state to game farms. And Mongolians, English blackneck, Japanese pheasants, and East Chinese ringnecks make up these 4 groups, but we know them. We know most of these birds today as the ringneck. And so most of these ringnecks that were hunted in the last century were descendants of these breeds that were crossed, and whether in the game farms or in the wild. Those are the ones that we know. It was about 1895 when pheasants first came to Michigan. There's a monument down by Holland where this Baumgartel brought them in and let them go. And you can see the monument there, there's a pheasant on it. This was an article. Again, this is about 1905. Ringneck pheasants and prairie chickens. This is actually 1920. It's after World War I. Are both found in Gratiot County, so they're starting to take off. By 1920, also people are getting birds, and they're not just bringing eggs; they're bringing birds into the county. Elverson and Sons store in Ithaca had birds for people who wanted to pick up. We're not sure if they're chicks or if they're adult birds or what they are. It was by 1928. Michigan was ready for its first hunting season. Prior to that, eggs had been distributed across the state of Michigan. I mean, way up here in the north, which is not good pheasant habitat at all, or in the UP. But there's an attempt to bring eggs, or in some cases, birds. And if you look across that central belt, you see here are all these eggs and mature birds are coming in. This is going to be the prime range of bird hunting in the 20th century across that belt, and then up into Sanilac County, kind of like a fish hook there.
Why not the UP?
Hard winter, too many woods and forests, not enough
Forage.
For birds. A lot of it was the climate. They didn't make it.
Okay.
Winter's exceptionally hard on them.
There is, I've never been up there, but in the hunting and trapping guide, in the UP's banana belt, there is a small population, and they have their own season. It opened October 10th, and it runs to the 31st.
That's Zone 1, isn't it? We're doing
Yeah.
Zone 1 today?
Yep.
Yeah, today we call it, zone 2 would be what, above us?
I
I think so.
Yeah.
And we're zone 3, which is kind of along that frost line, I think, in that area there, which opens, I think, it opens later this week, I think.
October 20th is opener
Yeah.
of the pheasant season
Yeah.
down here.
Down here in zone 3.
Yeah, and then just that little bit of zone 1 in Menominee County, a little bit of Delta has a farm belt where there's wild pheasants, I guess.
So, so the 1920s and 30s were largely spent trying to really grow a mature bird population. One of the things that the state would say over and over was that they believed that there was a 10-year cycle on pheasants. That if pheasants were allowed to take off and mature and repopulate, it would take off, peak, and then it would recede again. And this was supposed to be a 10-year cycle. And we kind of see that cycle in the 1950s when things start to, again, when things really start to change for the better, and then it hits a peak, and then it goes into serious decline again. On October 1928, Michigan had its first pheasant season. It opened October 25th in Gratiot County. Somewhat successful. By the 1930s, the Gratiot County Conservation League also wanted to see more pheasants brought into Gratiot County. They took eggs and they tried to hatch the eggs or give them to farmers to have chickens incubate the eggs. It was only about a 50% success rate. It was also the first time that adult birds were really being brought into the county. You can see on that right there that there we are on the map right there. Another thing that, we're jumping ahead to the 1940s here. So I found a couple pictures of families that are actually hunting at this time. Secords and gibbs. This was taken October 1948. Hunting got better. The picture said the dog wouldn't hunt after the first shot. All it would do was stay near the secords. I'm jumping ahead here myself. I want to talk about flushing bars. Do I have a picture of flushing bars? Flushing bars, not come back. Here we are, flushing bars. This is a Depression idea. The pictures are modern, but during the Great Depression, there was a movement for farmers to create flushing bars. So when they're cutting, whenever they're out in the hay fields or where they're cutting things, to put a bar out in front of the tractor with bells or some type of a chain on it. So it would create a noise, so when the tractor came down through the farm, the birds would have a chance to escape before they'd be chopped up. And so these were called flushing bars, and they first appeared in 1939 in Gratiot County. Back up here. What else can I tell you about the 1930s, 40s?
Just a quick question.
Yep.
If they knew that it was a 10-year cycle, why not start at year 5 and reintroduce? I mean, if you know that's happening, why not?
You had to ask for eggs, first of all, you had to apply for them. And
But if
then,
the counties knew, why not just make your program strong?
sounds like a good question.
What was the question?
Say it again.
If you know there's a 10-year cycle before the demise, why not start at year 5, introduce more birds so that at the end of the first 10-year cycle, you're strong at 5 years for the second cycle? Why not, if you know that, why not do that?
One of the things that was talked about throughout the 1940s and 50s was when they hit that cycle, when they hit that end, why not have a closed season for
Yeah.
1 or 2 seasons? And the lower season, Zone 3 never did it. They just never did it. They never went through with it.
One of the things they talk about, pheasants, unlike other game birds, it's easy to differentiate between the males and the females. So a lot of biologists say, some of the studies that, and male roosters are polygamous. So a lot of biologists think that if you have a season where the hens are protected, even when the population is down, taking roosters in a regulated season, you know, within a few weeks window, that shouldn't affect the overall population.
Okay.
Supposedly one rooster, there's a bunch of books at MSU when I was in college, because I like pheasant hunting and all that. Supposedly one rooster can could take care of up to 10 hens within that are in a square mile radius of where his crowing site is.
Okay.
So that would, according to that math, 90% of the rooster pheasants could be harvested or taken by predators through the spring, and then the population would still be able to
Survive.
Yeah.
Did the bars actually work? I mean, with the speed of the tractors, especially if you're chopping corn or something now, that wouldn't work.
I think it was for hay fields, because my dad's, those hens, their instinct is to try to protect their eggs
So
or
they
their
would
chicks, and they see something that's
sit
like a
down.
monster, they're gonna try to cover their chicks,
Yeah,
and then
they're
they
gonna
get chopped
stay,
up.
yeah.
Yeah.
But with this, I don't know what the speed was then, but with the speed now that we cut hay, they would hunker down and just never get away.
They wouldn't make it. I think it's why why the clover fields are not successful. Plus, like over by me, where I'm at, by Whitmore's, I mean, they're cutting clover, what, 4 or 5 times?
5 times. is
Those
what-
birds would never have a chance to
Get in.
brood a nest.
That's what my dad said, when he was a kid, the first cutting usually wasn't until sometime in June, mid to late
Now
June,
it's
and there was
May.
2 or 3 cuttings.
Now there's 5.
So a lot of times, chicks are already hatched by June, they can scurry away from a combine, but now they're
Yeah.
cutting in May, and like you said, 5 times, it
Into
looks like a
September.
lawn.
And then the machines move so much quicker now.
Yeah, there's so much.
And they're so
bigger.
much bigger.
Yeah.
And we take out deer all the time. We run out and chop them up.
The little ones that are hiding?
Some of the things about the Depression and pheasant hunting, one of the problems was people stealing dogs. In hunting season 1939, 12 dogs were taken in Gratiot County in 10 days.
What
Most
did
of them in southern Gratiot, most at night.
What did they do with them?
Steal them and resell
Hunting,
them.
you mean?
Hunting dogs, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Hunting dogs. Most of them were setters and beagles that were taken. And so the sheriffs had told people to put your dogs in at night, beware of people around your areas because dogs are coming up missing. One dog on the Clarence Clark estate was then worth $150
Wow.
that they lost. So. Sunday hunting was also an issue. I think in 1939 in Gratiot County it was actually outlawed. It was passed until about 1941 or 42, until the war started. So this is a big deal. The churches did not want people out hunting on Sunday, and they really fought this for a while until it was eventually repealed. Another one that was used in the Depression was pheasant banding pheasants. And so if you shot a bird, you were supposed to notify the state, of this band so they could track it. And banding went on until the 1950s. If a bird lived 5 years, if a rooster lived 5 years, like one did down in Hillsdale, they considered that to be quite an extremely long lifespan. These bands.
So all of the pheasants were banded?
Yes.
If they could?
Yes, to keep track of them. They were trying to monitor the population. Yeah. Another thing that happened at the end of the Depression was hunting co-ops. And there were 9 of these in Gratiot County in different townships. Seville had 2, Pine River had 1, New Haven, Arcata, Sumner, North Shade, where hunters or where farmers had tickets that they would give out to hunters who asked to hunt on their property, especially for those who were outside Gratiot County. And this was the problem, was that people were coming onto farms and leaving gates open, and animals were getting out, and they felt their property was being destroyed. So they tried this for a while, and the complaint was the farmers wouldn't give the tickets out to strangers. They'd give the tickets out to people in the county that they knew they could trust.
Yeah.
And so outsiders came and complained, we don't get a chance legally to hunt. And the idea was to let them hunt on property that they would not deface, or do something to. And they would try cooperatives for about 10 or 15 years. So we're at the 1940s here. So 40s and 50s, these are the boom years. 1942, 3, 4, 5 are generally good years. I wonder why.
World War II.
World War II.
Yeah.
There you go. There's just not enough hunters out there. So the birds have a chance to regroup and repopulate. There's also a shortage of gun shells. And there was a little store down on Ely Highway at the corner of Ely and there is a,
St. Charles?
St. Charles. There was a little tiny store down there. And people down at that end of the county knew that was the place to go to get shotgun shells because he had them. Even though they were kind of ration, he had shotgun shells. And so people would drive from the southern end of the county just to go to that little store to get shotgun shells during World War II, to hunt pheasants and other birds. Okay, Nimrods. I asked kids, well, was I going to get in trouble for showing this picture today? Did you hear about this? You heard about this?
No.
I heard a little bit about Disney says no more Elmer Fudd with guns.
Oh.
So I don't know if that offends anybody. That wasn't the intent, but.
That offends me. Elmer Fudd's supposed to have a shotgun.
Right.
And well, the other one was Yosemite Sam can no longer have a gun and his holster. So.
But Wile E. Coyote and the Roadrunner can still blow each other up with
They-
dynamite and
bombs
drop
and-
boulders on each other.
Anvils and all that
Yeah.
stuff. So. There were all kinds of issues with Nimrods, and a Nimrod was somebody who didn't seem to know what they were doing at the right time or at the right place. Usually people that were from out of the county and were causing problems one way or another. For example, down by Ashley, a Mrs. Pauline Sparks was shot in the arm when her husband's gun went off. He was reaching for a pheasant he had hit, and he straddled his gun the wrong way, and the shotgun went off. She caught pellets in her leg. Melvin Fisk of Ashley had a rollover with his car because he tried to avoid a flock of pheasants in May 1949. A pheasant hunter northwest of Ithaca chased a rooster into a cornfield, fired at it as it flew over at what he thought was a boulder. It turned out to be a doe, which he ended up killing. This was big news. A couple in Middleton had broken windows when a pair of pheasants flew inside, landed on the mantel, turned around and flew back out again. But one of the problems was this was addressed with this issue called the Horton Trespass Act, which started in 1939 to try to regulate where you hunt and how you hunt. And the whole premise was get to know your farmers, ask them for permission, treat their property with respect. You know, which is what I heard as a kid in the 1970s was that's how you're supposed to do it. Don't just walk out on somebody's bean field and go down through there, you know, with your dogs and knock the beans off. White beans, it used to be. White beans, you knock those off, the pods and stuff, you know, so don't do that. That was the premise of the Horton Trespass Act. So, then again, I talked about some of these people, you know, different injuries and things, crazy things that happen. Lots of stories about fines. I mean, thousands of dollars of fines every year in Gratiot County. Number one, too many birds in possession. Number two, hunting birds out of season, usually in the wintertime. I didn't really write the story down. 4 Mexican men north of St. Louis were arrested because they're hunting in January and they had 4 or 5 rooster pheasants in the car they got caught with, hunting out of season. It's a common theme among Nimrods. So. Another challenge, how do you monitor your bird counts? This was an issue the state tried to propose to people. If you got up early in the morning, usually a half hour to an hour after sunrise or before sunset, you could listen for a call, or there was some kind of device that made a call. Something you could do, I don't know, to call a rooster.
Return.
Right.
But they crow. Because I was a volunteer, the DNR was still doing the crow counts, they called it, through the mid-90s. I was a volunteer in my 20s. They give you a map, you would park at first light at certain spots, and they wanted you to count how many rooster pheasants you heard crow in, I think it was 2 minutes. And then you drive to the next spot. And if it was obviously the same bird, they didn't want you to count the same rooster twice.
How could you tell?
Well, sometimes there's one that's really loud and really close to you, so you know it's the same bird, even if he crows again 30 seconds later.
So did you call them, or did you just wait and listen?
I just waited and listened. I didn't have, but I know what you're talking about.
Because the newspapers are suggesting that they actually had routes that they told them to come down through Isabella County and down through Gratiot to Clinton, and they would stop. You say stop periodically and then do the call or listen for a call, and they figured out every rooster was worth how many hens?
10?
couple hens
Yeah, at
in
least.
an area to give you an account.
Yeah, I just did Elba Township, they had a route for me, and I'm sure they had a volunteer for every township in Gratiot County.
How long did the count go on?
It was in May and June, I think that's when they do crow in the fall, but they're very active in the spring. I think it's part of the whole courtship ritual that they have to try to attract mates.
What does it sound like? Does it sound like
It's a scratchy, I can't imitate animal sounds.
Oh,
It's-
please.
Something like a rooster, regular
And
chicken
then
rooster?
Have you never heard of pheasant?
I was gonna play some for you, but I couldn't get reception in there.
Oh,
Yeah.
well, maybe we can't.
Try it, see if you get pheasant crowing.
Yeah. And sometimes they cackle when they flush is.
Oh man, the scariest thing as a
Yeah.
kid for me was, I was a Nimrod, I was out there hunting, and then you flushed a rooster, and it took off, and as he's flying, he's cackling. I mean, that, you can hear that loud noise, as he's,
It's like buck fever.
and then he just coasts.
Yeah.
They fly for a little bit, and then they just coast. You watch them go across the field. Oh yeah, if you don't know what you're doing, it scares the heck out of you. So, yeah.
So do I take that to mean he was laughing at you?
I think so, because I could never hit anything.
When I missed, he said he was laughing at me, he was giving you the feather, because he was flying straight away from me, all I could see was his tail feather.
I remember getting mad enough once I kicked my boot off. So I can't hit these birds. Shotgun, so. The other way they measured was mail carriers. Also were out at the time Mr. Smoke was talking about here, May, June, and watching for broods crossing the road, and then counting how many hens they saw, if they could estimate how many chicks were in the brood or not, how many broods they would see at a time. I think this was used more in the 1950s and 60s than is used with the crow counts. At least in the newspapers here in this county.
Yeah, there's Pheasants Forever people that, like Mr. Viles, that could know more about that than I do, but I think you're right.
And of course, this affected the local economies in a lot of places. There were local cafes and places to eat who purposely stayed open on pheasant season day. Opening day was a big thing. There's a cafe in Ashley who advertised, we are open for pheasant season. Come in, to take a break.
When is that advertisement?
That's the 1950s. Yeah. Somebody's gonna get it.
Is that
There it
it?
is.
Yep, there it is. That's it. Yep.
Good job.
Used to come a lot more than the year done.
Yeah.
With it.
There you go.
Yeah, that's a good one.
I tried to find one when he was flying and making that noise. I couldn't find one on there, but it's haunting when you hear. If you don't know what you're doing, it can really it'll wake you up. So, places like Lynn's and St. Louis, Van Etten's, come in. Small game season. So the 1950s were really the highlight of, I think, the high point of hunting pheasants. A lot of high schools had pheasant dinners. Breckenridge, 1952, had a dinner one night, fed 120 people. St. Louis FFA also had one about that time, fed over 100 people, invited people to come into. Community township halls might have gatherings where they had pheasant suppers. So it was very prevalent to do that at that time. But it looks to me, I would guess, probably 1955. That's about the peak of pheasant hunting in the county.
Are they hunting with Cocker Spaniels?
Looks like it doesn't.
It looks like it doesn't. The ears
Yeah,
could be.
guess it could be a setter.
Could be.
Could be an Irish setter.
I guess it looks like it.
Irish setters were popular.
Because they're
for
pretty
dogs
long
back then.
legs.
Yeah,
They
that
are.
one has longer legs.
The one at the bottom looks bigger, like a setter, Irish setter.
It could be a setter. It could
Good
be.
question.
As long as they hunt and point, it doesn't matter.
Right.
This is actually kind of out of context. This was taken about 1951. A couple of the Flegel brothers down by North Star hunting pheasants here. One of the issues that went on toward the end of the 1950s was how do you feed the birds, especially the hard winters. This is a very young Dave Walsh, and this is his dad. and they are going out in the countryside. They've got a truckload of ear corn, and they're going out to drop off corn for the pheasants so they have something to eat. This is something my dad strongly believed in, and I can remember about the time of the ice storm in 1976, coming back from St. Louis for some reason, and as we got to the cloverleaf, there must have been 4 or 5 rooster pheasants on the east side of the road where the gas stations used to be. There was a Gulf Oil gas station, and there was the Cloverleaf restaurant, and they were all lined up along the edge of the road, and the pavement had just started to melt. And they were out dancing around there. My dad says they're going to get hit, and I said, what's going on? Well, they're looking for food, and also they're looking probably for grit for their crop. And so what do you do? We ran straight home. He goes to the barn, he grabs a container, a coffee can of shelled corn that he had. He scoops it up. We get back in the truck. We run back to the cloverleaf, and he starts driving up and down the cloverleaf, throwing corn out the window at the pheasants, so that hopefully they can see it, but also not come out in the road to get it. And so he's doing that, and then when he's going this direction, when he's going southbound, he's doing it. When it's going northbound, he turns around, he makes me do it. And I throw it out the window. He tells me, throw it out so they can see it, but so they don't come out the road and get hit.
Good times,
So-
Jim, good
so-
times.
Take care of I guess the message was take care of the pheasants, take care of them. He knew that, he'd seen that, so. But the 1960s and 70s as well, this is the decline of pheasants in the county and also in Michigan. Mailmen saw less broods. Counts are down. Mail carriers don't see that many. Crow calls are down, and so by 1962-63, people are saying, like in Gratiot County, hey, something is wrong. And although this is Sanilac County, this eventually spreads across Michigan. The value of farmland increases so much. Farmers are cleaning out their ditches, and they're pulling out hedgerows, which is what the pheasant needs to survive. And there's discussion about other things. It will be PB, or it will be DDT. It will be pesticides. The role, big one, argue about the role of the fox. The fox are killing too many birds. The raccoons are spoiling too many nests in April, May, June. If you get a really wet spring, it spoils the nesting period for the hen pheasants. So all these things are being bandied about as the 60s go on, but I think this was the main reason of why the pheasant went into such decline. You just don't see fence rows. I went out, and I'm kind of in charge of mowing the fence row on my property. I don't own all of it, but I inherited it when I moved out there in the 1990s. I mow the track that goes 1/8 of a mile behind my house to a ditch, large ditch, and I let it go this spring because I was busy, and so the clover and stuff, I mean, it was up there, it was approaching a foot. So I thought, I'm not going to go down through there unless I go down first to see, 1, do I flush any fawns, and 2, do I flush any pheasants. And I got a long stick, and I'm singing as I walk down through there and swinging it, and I did it twice just to make sure I didn't, run over something, and I didn't, but I guess I was destroying habitat too, in a sense. So the numbers, I mean, this is 1966, here's Gratiot County, fair hunting, made projected as fair. And it will go from fair to poor in a hurry. Again, these were all arguments about what was going on in the 1960s. There was actually an editorial, did I find it or not? Let me see here. And I can read just part of this. This is from the Herald. I won't read the whole thing, but it's called The Pheasant Crisis, and this is after hunting season ends in 1967. This is what the writer says to the Gratiot County Herald. The shortage of ringnecks comes as no news to those of us who are in Gratiot County, one of Michigan's richest agricultural areas, an area that should be able to support thousands of birds. The cold hard fact is that we aren't. Why? Ask 10 conservationists and you'll get 10 different answers. It could be amount of cover, chemicals, raccoon population, foxes, winters are too hard, or the normal cycle of decline with pheasants. The list goes on and on. The fact remains, however, that for at least 10 years the pheasants have been disappearing in Gratiot County. As we suggested in this space 5 years ago, the Conservation Department should follow one of two courses. A 1-year statement moratorium on shooting pheasants should be enacted, or zone hunting should be implemented. So I'm wondering if that's if that's the time zones really came in, was the late 60s. I didn't know how far back zones went, but, you know, I'm guessing it was that was one of the consequences, because they didn't close it. I don't think they ever put a moratorium on pheasant seasons in the 60s or 70s that I remember hearing about anyway. So, some more pictures of guys hunting. This guy's from St. Louis, and I have his name here. The picture's important only because he's from St. Louis, but they're hunting down by Hillsdale, and it kind of symbolized that more and more hunters are going outside Gratiot County if they want to go find pheasants. And that guy is Marty Helms in St. Louis, right there. This is this an onlogger?
That doesn't look like a pheasant's game.
That one isn't, but that one is.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
The other consequence was, well, they hunt for other birds.
Yeah.
They give up on pheasants, and so they go. He's hunting over by Elwell,
Yeah.
and so they go hunting for other things. There's no pheasants.
We'll switch to ducks. When I was hunting a lot of my teachers said, because they knew I liked to hunt pheasants. So I used to hunt pheasants all the time, but when the population crashed, they still wanted to hunt where they would see game, so they switched to duck hunting.
Yeah. So no pheasants, go for something else. Kind of the last thing that the county did, and other counties did to try and revive the population in the early 70s was to hatch pheasants and get people to raise them and then release them. And so this, in about 1970, the Board of Commissioners actually wanted 4-H groups to do this. And so, but they had to get permission from what we call today the DNR to do it. So it took about a year. And I belong to the Lucky Clovers, and Herb Baxter, who was my 4-H leader, was one of the first to hatch pheasants as a civilian and give them out to 4-H students to try and raise. And one of those was Kim Bebo, late Kim Bebo of St. Louis, who did this. Ellis Williams was another one from St. Louis. He's gone. He's no longer alive. He did that for a while with the Lucky Clovers. BB Beef also did this, and they tried it. You know, I think the most that Bebo released at one time was like 25 birds, but they tried it briefly in the 1970s. But, one of the last things also the DNR tried to do was called the Sichuan pheasant, which was another breed from China, and to bring them in and see if they would take off. And from what I read about the Sichuan was that it failed largely because the Sichuan was a pen-raised bird and did not do that well in the wild. So they tried it. They tried it a couple times. At one time, they released 2,000 birds in the Michigan area, and they didn't survive. They didn't make it through the winters. They just didn't seem to be that hardy of a bird.
Their Sichuan genetics, enough of them survived that you'll still see a few all black neck pheasants. I actually have a picture I took this, I live in Montcalm County, and I've shot a couple in there that have really thin, pencil thin half neck rings, and I saw one on private land, food plot. I took a picture and sent it to a friend of mine that bird hunts.
So you think they cross?
Yeah, and once in a while, I'm not a science teacher, but there's probably some ringnecks have that recessive gene that expresses itself with full black neck pheasants.
So that kind of leaves me. That's where I'm going to leave off the 1980s. But I did some research here. I was asking about pheasants now, and I like this from the Sexy Pheasant Farm.
What is that?
Yeah. How many of these pheasant farms there are in the mid-Michigan area, or lower Michigan, you could go to and you can hunt pheasants. And from these three, the fee was, you got to pay, first of all, there's an entrance fee. You take your own dog, or you're going to hire a dog, or you're going to hire a guide. And they were anywhere from $25 to $35 a bird that you paid that you shot on that farm. But they had winter hunting, they had current hunting, they take by appointment, and I mean this is 3 out of, I probably saw 20 of them. I just went online looking to see how many there were. There might be more than that.
How big are these farms?
Acreage
are we looking at?
I don't want to close to 900 acres over here in the Thumb area.
Okay.
I think it's called the Upland Game Farm, and something that's like hundreds of acres.
Okay.
So, So people can go out and hunt on these private farms. So. I don't know the last time well, just a minute, I've got this one here. So, again, Pheasants Forever, they're have a program or mission to try and keep the birds, bring them back. Another one, the East Gratiot Pheasant Co-op. I think this was 2 years ago. This article's in the Herald. But, so we talked about this one in the zone. It'll be opening here this next week. I can't remember the last time I saw anybody hunting in Gratiot County birds. Well, I'm not out running the roads during pheasant season, but I used to go, just driving to Middleton in the morning, I would see a truck pulled over on M57 out in a stubble field or somewhere, and you could see the guys, running dogs. But I haven't seen one in 15 years.
There's state land that's managed for pheasants that gets hunted hard by the Maple River in Gratiot County. But yeah, you don't see many, there's a lot of private land habitat around anymore.
So this was 2 winters ago. I looked out my bathroom window and I saw something moving, and I looked, and in my pine trees here was this beautiful rooster pheasant on a cold winter day, and he was nesting and trying to eat berries, dried berries off some of these bushes. And so remembering what my dad did, I later got a pan full of bird feed and took it out underneath some of the trees and left it there. I imagine the sparrows probably got it. But I flushed a hen in July near my mailbox, but I can't remember the last time I heard a rooster crow cackle. I don't know. Out in North Star Township. So I think that's it. That's it.
Thank you, Jim.
Yeah, thank you, that was great.
I hear it once in a while around here.
Do you?
Yeah. It's very special every time.
Well, I used to get excited when you hear them flying. The roosters, when they're flying and cackling, oh man. So I haven't heard one in a long time. 10 years, I don't know. I haven't heard one out there where I live. So I see tracks once in a while behind my house, and rooster tracks. But everything I see is not pheasants, it's turkeys.